Hey everybody, this is Mycophile Sage checking in here, and I just wanted to welcome you guys to my new series called Trips That Changed My Life. And for the first couple of episodes, I'm going to be going over a series of trips that I had in 2012 and one in 2013. And these trips, it's like 3, 4, 5 trips maybe that had the biggest influence on me. So I wanted to go over these things because so far I've focused on cultivation and I focused a little bit on the cultural side and maybe a little bit on species, but I haven't gone into the personal too much about the personal effects, positive and negative effects that mushrooms often have on people. Thankfully for me, it's been mostly positive. So I wanted to go over my first trips, the trips that changed my life. And also, after I'm done with my own personal trips, I may expand this series and I may have you guys, if you guys want to send in your personal experiences, your trip reports, whatever, and this will be kind of like a podcast and I'll read it on air, or perhaps maybe eventually we could have like little discussions, like live, not like interviews. Well, I guess I'll interview you and your trip experience and stuff like that. So that's in the works. Eventually. I got a lot of projects going on right now, guys, so please bear with me. I have some big plans for this channel, so yeah. Anyways, so this first trip that I had was in 2012 when I just started university. I went to university in a foreign country, and basically I've been meaning to try mushrooms before. This was so my first proper mushroom trip was in the second semester of this university, which was in 2012, in fall 2012. I started in the winter semester. Basically, my experiences prior to this were just hash, marijuana, or what was supposed to be marijuana. So I'm sure that I got spiked a couple of times with some synthetic cannabinoids, which was not fun at all. This is back in the days of, Spice Mania. And in terms of psychedelics, I have had experiences with, I had one experience with LSD, a pretty potent tab of LSD. I'm sure it was LSD, because I've tripped many times since, and I know what LSD feels like. It was LSD. And this was before the days of 25-MBOME. So this was just before the days of that. So it was definitely LSD. And that was a very bad trip. That was my first experience with psychedelics, and it was awful. It was just one tab, but I was having, visuals and stuff. And I was completely wasted when I took that LSD. Completely wasted, maybe a bottle of vodka, obviously lots of weed. And I took some of my friends' antipsychotics or something. It wasn't a good experience at all. I took it at like 12 at like midnight, and around 2:30 I was having a cigarette with some friends outside, and I asked them like, is it just me or does everything look purple? And they're like, no, Sage, I think that's just you. I think it's that acid you took that's kicking, because they didn't take acid. They're not into that. And I was like, the people that gave me this acid were 2 other friends, one of whom was very interested in taking LSD. The other one, not so much. I'll just call the one who was interested in taking the acid J, and the one who wasn't S, who's going to come back multiple times in my trip report stories in these first few trips, because S was, I thought that S was my best friend at the time in this new place. And it turned out that he was actually my greatest enemy. So, yeah. And J, I think he was kind of autistic, but, and perhaps a little bit sociopathic. That's a long story, but he had to go, and he went to like a mental hospital or something eventually in a couple of years down the road. So he just disappeared from university one day. He started taking Adderall, and I think that set something off. But he was taking a lot of drugs. Anyways, that's a different story altogether. But Yeah, so they were supposed to like, they're my buddies, so I thought they'd like look after me a little bit and stuff, especially since S wasn't even tripping or anything. But anyways, that goes to bite him back, a couple of months later, when we both take mushrooms, and he had a really bad time and I had a really great time. So I basically retreated back to my room, and I was like, okay, I'm going to sleep this off. I'm going to sleep this off. And little did I know, because I knew nothing about psychedelics back then, right? I was just like, I didn't even do research. I was like, oh, what's this? Oh, let's take it. Ooh, hoo, hoo, hoo. And, it came to bite me in the ass. I was up all night, trying to sleep, watching stick figures walk around my bed, watching the patterns morphing. And I was like, oh, please don't get any higher than this. Oh my God, I'm not ready for this. So it was basically an awful time. I woke up in the morning, went to the cafeteria looking ragged as and, I confronted S about it. I was like, oh man, like I just had a terrible, terrible time. I must have tried to go to his dorm because we were living in a dormitory in the same floor, and I must have went there, but he didn't answer or anything. I guess he just couldn't be bothered, or he was sleeping or something. But anyway, so that's my first experience with psychedelics, LSD. And ever since then, I'm very, very distrustful of LSD. I've tripped many times. I've had great trips, but I'm very, very just careful with LSD because it's very potent. Not to say that the experience is more potent than mushrooms, but I think that my personal view is that, in short, I might make a video on this later, but in short, mushrooms take you on a journey. They basically show you what you got to see, but with LSD, it's very, very self-driven. So people say that you have more control, which I guess is true, but the thing is, there's no guide in my experience with LSD. So you could freak yourself out into all sorts of crazy delusional thoughts. I think there's a lot more delusional thoughts that come with LSD rather than mushrooms, whereas mushrooms is more like truths, even though it may be weird as I think mushrooms show you the truth more. And I just feel that it's a safer substance in the long run compared to acid, also because LSD is just so potent. I mean, in my opinion, it is like the most powerful drug in the world, just based on how much, like if you took the amount of psilocybin or psilocin that you would take with mushrooms, let's say like 20 milligrams, right? Shut up. 20 milligrams compared to 100 micrograms for a trip, or 150 micrograms. I mean, imagine taking 10-20 milligrams of LSD, if you were doing it equipotent, well, not equipotently, but like just the same amount. Basically, acid is a very powerful substance, and it must be respected for that. But anyways, I digress. So my gosh, it's almost 10 minutes. Okay, so the first trip that I had was with a friend called T. I'll call him T. He's a neutral guy. He's a cool guy. He had lots of experiences tripping. He was probably the most psychedelically inclined of the whole sort of friend circle that I was in, and he and the most experienced. So and he lived in the dorm next to me, in the next room. So we were hanging out, and we got our hands on some mushrooms, basically, from another friend, and Liberty Caps. My first few trips were on Liberty Caps, and ever since then they've become my favorite mushroom species. But Liberty Caps, and I took, so we set a date for tripping, right? And I decided to take 1.75 grams, and he took 5 grams of Liberty Caps. And so Jay, if you remember Jay, who took some acid that time that acid came around, he basically was supposed to trip with us. So we set a date. We're like, okay, so let's all do it, because he's never done mushrooms either. So he was very curious. And so we did it, but when the time came, he was MIA. He didn't answer his phone. He didn't answer his messages or anything. So we're like, so me and T, we're like, okay, well, let's just take it. okay, because we've been waiting a while and we can't get in contact with him, So we take it, and then it starts kicking in. I was laying on his bed, and he was sitting on his chair, and he was playing Aphex Twin, and it was just like amazing, as the trip came on, and I was getting these geometrical CEVs, and I was seeing like the wood start to move with my eyes open, and I was like, oh, this is so much more chill than LSD, and this feels so natural and normal, and I have absolutely no fear at all, and I'm like, I sort of awoke to the world, I was looking at the world in a different way. And so that was my first time that I had that kind of altered state experience that was positive and truly beneficial. And anyways, we decided to go for a walk in the nearby park. And we get out of the room. I remember walking down the hallway and feeling like I was just a head just floating. Everything was kind of wonky, and it was pretty cool. And like distances would like be really far away, and then they would like come up really close and stuff. Come to think of it, that's actually quite a decent dose, I think, for a first timer, 1.75 grams of Liberty Caps. But I'm glad that I took that amount. And because it was completely not overwhelming at all for me at that time. It was completely different from what I expected. And so we start walking to the park, and I tell Jay, I just keep, because I'm a good guy, just keep in touch. Okay, we're going to the park now, so if you want to meet up, we're going to the park. And Jay comes to the park with S, and they start up all this drama. Like S, he's too scared to take it. I guess he had some bad experiences in the past. He had some problems with MDMA in the past, like addiction and stuff like that. So yeah, what a friend group, right? Jay and S come, and they start stirring up some shit. They're like, oh, why'd you start, without Jay, S says. And, he's just trying to stir because he knows we're tripping, and I guess he's trying to give us a bad experience, a bad trip. What a friend, right? I guess he was feeling left out because he was too scared to take it or whatever. I don't know. But for the first time, I just saw everything clearly about this dynamic. I was like, wow, this guy's abusive. And Jay is a douchebag as well, because he knows that we're tripping, and he thinks it's funny to give us a bad trip by giving us shit. So I just told him, look, you guys are making it seem like as if I'm ostracizing Jay, but you weren't there. We agreed, right, Jay? We agreed at 3 p.m. that you say, and he was like, yeah, we did. I was like, check your messages, right? I sent you all these messages, and now you're trying to start stuff because we're tripping now? Like, I was like, look, I'm gonna have a good time with or without you, all right? If you'd like to join, then go ahead and join. But I'm going off and enjoying this walk. So I just start walking, and they start following me like little following dogs. And like gnats, right? And so I'm just walking, just enjoying my experience. So, it was a really empowering experience. It really opened my eyes. Ever since that trip, I feel like I could see people better for who they are. Yeah, definitely. I could read people a lot better ever since that experience. And it just opened me up to the fact that, wow, there's some real fucking douchebags out there. Even people who say you're friends. Because up till that point, people who were friends, that I consider friends, were actual friends. They're actual friends. Yeah, sure, we might have some disagreements there, but nothing like this. Nothing so malicious as trying to give a friend a terrible experience, with a trip. So basically, that was a trip from what I remember from it, and those were the highlights. And it was a very important trip because back then, I'm too scared, really. I'm not scared, but just worried because I respect the power of the mushrooms too much to trip outside in public nowadays. But back then I didn't know. And I had like friends, back in university who were who tripped like tea, right? So we could both go outside and stuff like that. But the magical thing about that experience was that it was an outside trip in public, dealing with factors that I would have otherwise hated to deal with even when sober, but I dealt with it during my first trip. And it was really empowering because I just saw everything clearly, and it was nothing like I expected. And I just felt really, really powerful in myself. And I was like, you know what? I'm not wrong here. Because I was racked with self-doubt, always considering like, oh, am I right or am I wrong? Or, stuff like that. Whereas I guess douchebags are just like, "Ooh, I'm right," Ooh. Now that I look back at it, they're just not that intelligent. So as douchey as that sounds, it's just basically what the mushrooms opened my eyes to. Is just, you know what, I've been taught that I'm told that I'm crazy, or that I'm weird or I'm stupid for a number of factors, whatever. And I just realized, no, it's like I'm actually looking above what they're thinking, which is a different story. But basically, the mushrooms taught me, what can I say? Like it was a public trip, so I was dealing with all these things while in that tripping space, and I think that really just consolidated a lot of my thinking. Even when I'm sober, even when I'm out in public sober, that experience I think has definitely altered the way I look at things and situations and people. So that's pretty much the trip, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm gonna be posting a couple more of these in the coming weeks and months, because this period of my life was probably the time that mushrooms had the most influence. Ever since then, they haven't really had, like, I get nice afterglows and stuff, but nothing like these first few trips. And I think it's because, mushrooms don't teach the same lesson twice. And these first few trips really had a huge influence on my life. So I hope you guys enjoyed the story. I hope I didn't come off as kind of a douche when I was talking about, I think above them or something like that. But I just want you guys to understand the context that, like, I didn't do well in school at all. I wasn't like into team sports. I was always into independent sports like skateboarding and stuff like that. And I was in a pretty competitive school. And so people just, didn't get it, I guess. And I was like, why can't I just be like that? Why can't I just be normal? But I realized I'm just very independent-minded. And I just look at things differently. And there's positives to and negatives to all of that. The negatives for me is that I guess it's kind of hard to relate, for some people to relate. But the positives is that I think I have a very, very interesting view on life and various other things that hopefully I can contribute to the world. I guess one way is through this channel. So, it's just, everything's a long story, but anyways, that's my first proper mushroom trip. I hope you guys enjoyed this experience, and stay posted for the next one, guys. Have a good one. Mycophile Sage, checking out.